Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Good morning, Heather.
Morning.
So Heather, are you officially out of the vaccine clinics now, or?
Well, we have 1 month to go out to do second dose shots for the folks that got vaccinated yesterday.
Oh, okay.
But fingers crossed.
I hope
But
so.
we're kind of done with that. We'll see.
Morning, everybody.
Morning,
Good
Chad.
morning.
How are you?
Morning, all.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Sarah, you want me to take notes today, correct?
If you will, yes, sorry that I messed
Sure.
that up. Thank you. And then I'll do it next week and I'm gonna change the order. Thank you, Andrea.
Sure.
I knew somebody had said they would do it, but I couldn't remember who, so. And then I'll recirculate that list to everyone. Roz is
Sarah,
not able
The
to.
only person I heard from was Erin. She's not able to make it this morning. But I didn't hear from either Roz or Crystal. So I'm not
I
sure.
did.
Okay.
Roz is not able to be here today. Her father just had surgery, and so.
Okay.
Um,
And I know Crystal is sometimes needs to be a little bit late. So I guess that's everybody then.
Okay, so should we maybe get started in a minute then? I see Crystal's logging on, so. Why don't we get started then? Because I don't know that we're missing anyone who's coming, so. All right. So we'll call it to order, and Andrea, thank you for agreeing to take minutes. So I realize on the agenda, it says approval of minutes for March 12th, but I think that should say March 26th because we did already approve the March 12th minutes. It was just the last two meetings. We didn't have a chance to do that because we hadn't circulated them. At this point, did everyone get a chance to look at the March 26th minutes?
Yes.
Do I have a motion to approve them as is, or are there?
Motion to approve.
Thank you, Peter. Anyone want to second that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so those minutes are approved. Then we have the minutes from April 8th, which now that's our last meeting. And those were also circulated. Did anyone have any comments on any of that? I had one sentence, but I don't know if it's worth putting in the minutes, but I feel like I heard them loud and clear that it's a new day, and that had they done their campaign today, they would have done something. They may have considered some issues of equity, and they may have considered some issues other than what they did. But I don't know if that has to be in the minutes. I just maybe want it to be in our heads. So I'm fine.
I mean,
just putting it in. Yeah.
I wrote the minutes and I agree with you. What was said, I just didn't put it in. Because there's a lot of these, you have to pick what you want to have in minutes, right?
Absolutely, especially when you have a speaker. I mean, sometimes you just say, we had a speaker and it's recorded, so, right. Fine. So does anyone want to approve the minutes as is?
So moved.
Thank you. Anyone want to second that? I'll second it. How about that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the minutes passes and that was easy. So I think you all saw my list that I circulated. Normally I would just go alphabetical, but we've had a few volunteers already. And rather than ask for volunteers, I felt like, why don't we just keep a running list, and I'll keep the list and just tell you who's taking the minutes for that day. So and then Andrea had reminded me that last time she had agreed to do it. So I just switched her. I put myself next since I was enforcing this system. And after that, we'll sort of go alphabetical with the people who are left. Does that sound fine to everyone?
Sounds good.
Yeah, then we won't waste any time on it from now on. So, okay. Similarly, meeting schedules, I think we have solidified that every other week right now, Fridays at 8:30. So why don't we go ahead and just calendar that for the next, few months, so we don't have to.
I'll take care of that. I'll send out an invite for all those.
Fine, and that way we don't have to, at the end of each meeting, confirm it. And also, as conflicts arise, I don't think we're gonna switch. We're just gonna try to keep that. Okay, so, we've heard a lot, and I don't know about you, but I've been thinking a lot about everything all of our guests have said. Oh, sorry, one thing about the meetings, Matt pointed out, and this is fair, that perhaps we want to start thinking about some meetings in person. I don't know where we are. I know that I'm not totally vaccinated yet. And so I didn't know if people feel, if this group is going to almost all be vaccinated and wants to meet in person. Something Matt had sort of suggested, what if we met once a month? I also have to be honest and say, I assume, Dave, that there's a room for us to meet at this time, but obviously we haven't cleared that because we haven't needed a room.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what the policy is going forward for town meetings. I think it's
Fine.
still a little bit in flux. So let me find that out. And then, we can get a room certainly on Fridays. I just don't know what the, kind of overarching policy is yet. I think the idea is maybe sometime in May, we move back towards in-person meetings. The challenge is that we still have to record them and have them available on Zoom. So there is some technological hurdles that we have to overcome. So we can't just meet in person without having it broadcast on Zoom as well. We need to have these hybrid style meetings now.
So pre-pandemic, how did that work?
Well, pre-pandemic, it was just in person and people could come into the meeting. But now with the pandemic, we're being
because they're not open.
Yeah, and we're being required to have these more hybrid style meetings. So there is some technological changes that we're doing to the room A over here for that, but it's not clear exactly how the smaller boards like this might be handled. So I'll follow up on that, but I think probably for the next few meetings, we still may be on Zoom, and then maybe either towards the end of May or beginning of June, we might be able to start meeting in person.
Fine, that's fine with me. I want to know, does everyone else feel comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I am. I mean, I'm vaccinated, and I think we can find, there's not that many of us that we can't, find a room that would give us decent space still. Maybe even the senior center has some rooms too that might be available. I don't know.
Okay. It also seems to me, Dave, when you're looking into it, it could be as simple as I bring my laptop and it's a Zoom meeting where we we put the laptop, up high so everyone's there, and it's not the same as, but then it cannot be a private meeting, and it can be recorded from there. And so it doesn't have to be, you know what I mean, the best camera view in order to meet.
Yeah, and that you're right. That may be how we run these smaller meetings. I mean, Peter's on planning and zoning as well. We have a little bit of a different hurdle there because more people are participating and there's legal
Got it.
consequences. But yeah, you're correct. We might be able to do that.
Okay. But I agree, we don't want it open necessarily yet. So, okay. All right. Thank you, Matt, for mentioning that, because I've forgotten what it's like to leave this room. So I was going to say, then you have to wear nice pants. That's the only thing. You have to wear nice pants. I enjoy going to court and wearing leggings, but I'll get over it.
Yeah, it's funny. We had planning and zoning meeting. We were talking about the attire, and I kind of forgot that we were being recorded and made the comment that I was wearing sweatpants and flip-flops, but you couldn't see it. So
Yeah. We joke a lot that you don't want to stand up and object to the judge ever.
No.
Okay, so now we heard a lot, and Dave, I want to thank you for getting those speakers in, because I thought they were excellent and really helpful, and felt like we could probably spend a day with all of them. And so I guess I just wanted to open it up to general thoughts, what we thought about, what we heard, what it made us think about our own committee. And I put down some specific things just to sort of get us talking and thinking. And, some of the things I heard was this idea of the committee name and what that's going to mean to people. And I was curious to hear people's thoughts on that. And then we heard about the videos, and some of us, I hope maybe you got a chance to see the video that that Guilford did, the videos, the materials they put out. I heard a lot of meetings with the public, meet with the public, teach the public, things like that. So I just wanted to hear what people thought and what it made you think about, what we should be doing.
Yeah, Peter, I guess my view is that, I agree with you. I think the whole communication thing is huge. And if you listen, think about our last speakers with Liza and Mary Jo, the educational tail, if you will, is really long. And I think there's a lot of embedded prejudice, isn't the right word, but bias as to what affordable housing is or isn't. And I think we're going to have to try to debunk a lot of that. I don't know if anybody watched the myth video, or debunking the myth video on desegregate CT. It was pretty good, and I watched it yesterday. And it is an educational process, because there is a lot of information, there's a lot of misinformation out there as well. And then you layer on, I think this is one of the things that concerns me, you layer on the whole issue that's going on with the Senate bill right now, and how that's getting people sort of agitated about the whole notion of affordable housing, whether we should be making a statement or not making a statement, and what's our position as a town and all of that. I think we're doing this committee a little bit of an incendiary environment right now, which I think means we've really got to educate people quite well. That's it.
And I'll just add to that environment in Madison right now, where there's, some cluster housing going up that is not affordable housing. That's, causing people to be up in arms. That's also going to influence people and how they're thinking about what we're doing. What I think a lot about, I think when watching what happened with the schools was really instructive to me. And even though you think you're reaching out to people, it seems like until something is imminent, they don't pay attention. And so for me, it's about how do we get people to pay attention now, so that they can hear what we're saying about affordable housing. And I don't have the answer to that. I just know that from what I've seen in Madison, and probably every town, every place, that's really important, that people don't feel like there were these secret meetings that they somehow missed, and this was decided for them.
And the more, it seems like the current state of messaging for those who may be opposed to the idea is out there, in pretty strong force. And I was wondering, I was reading something the other day somebody wrote, and I was thinking, okay, I know you're against this, but what are you for? And what's our response? Do we have a responsibility to begin, as Peter said, education and outreach and messaging? And the sooner we do that, I think the better off we're going to be in the long run, because the distrust or the uneasiness that has been articulated is clearly out there already. And I think, we may want to start thinking deeply about how we reach out to folks and say, look, this is what we're doing. This is what we think where we're headed. I don't know what the message is, but we should start that sooner rather than later, I think.
Yeah, I mean, sorry to keep jumping in, but the other thing I think that's really important that we make sure of is that we separate what's being proposed in Hartford from the need for just affordable housing in Madison, notwithstanding the new bill. 830G says we're supposed to be elevating our level of affordable housing and the availability of it. And we need to keep focused on that position, because they may do something in Hartford that we don't like, but it doesn't change the fact that we need to expand affordable housing, notwithstanding what Hartford might be saying. So I think that's something that we have to make people understand as well. Put aside home rule and all of that. It's that we have this issue regardless, and we've got to solve it.
I totally agree with that, Peter.
Yeah, and I think along those lines, we have to think about our own, thoughts on why we are doing this. And I think seeing these other speakers, I can't help but feel like our first step is really thinking about who we're reaching out to in the community, and having a series of possibly private conversations, and not secret conversations, but going to places like Stop and Shop and Madison Beach Hotel, going all around town, and then giving a brainstorm of who are the people that we want to reach out to hear their reasons, and before and then having maybe just some panels where people speak on these issues. Along those lines, I've thought a lot about, renaming the committee. And when that first came up, I liked that idea, because why name something with a knee-jerk reaction, but where people will have a knee-jerk reaction. More and more, I feel opposed to that idea, but I'd like to hear what other people think. And partly I feel like we named this committee, before some of us got on. So it is named. So it would be a name change, which, anyone could follow that trail. So it looks a little disingenuous. And part of it is, I feel like, why not call a spade and educate people on what we're talking about when we talk about affordable housing? Though I realize that gives us a little bit more of an uphill battle. And I don't know what people thought about the name change, or whether that's just silly and it wasn't something that really caught your attention anyway, so it's not worth talking about.
What would you think of changing the name to? That would be less controversial.
So I again think we shouldn't. And if everybody agrees, then we don't have to talk about it. But I think it was David Fink who had made the suggestion, and others have said, it could be the housing planning. It could be a lot of different things that I think when people hear affordable housing, they have their own, reactions to it. And yet I feel like we want to create affordable housing. So I'd rather educate people on what that means rather than change the name. But I
agree. I think there's a lot of history with the naming of it already. And a lot of the committees that get named in Madison are called ad hoc committees. The government committee that I was on was the ad hoc government committee, and I just think people are kind of used to it, and so we can get past the name. At least that's my view.
Fine. Anyone who hasn't joined in, who has thoughts about, things we've heard, or, yeah.
I'll just share my thoughts. I agree. I don't think we should change the name for a lot of the reasons you articulated, Sarah, but it's also the Affordable Housing Plan Advisory Committee, which the document that we're supposed to create is called in Connecticut General Statutes, the Affordable Housing Plan. So I think it's just not wise for us to shift midstream. And I think, we are going to talk about housing in general at times, and not all of it affordable, but I think the plan that we're being tasked to create is clearly called the Affordable Housing Plan. So I would like to stick with the current name for that reason.
That's fine. It sounds like we're all in agreement. And, I was trying to pull out some threads that I heard them say. What about the video? I mean, does that idea appeal to people or do you think, people will take note of that? What do you think is the way to start this conversation in Madison?
I think the video seemed to have had a big impact on the Guilford community, and I think it looks like it would do the same in Madison. I think that was an excellent way to get the word out and to educate people.
I agree. I thought the video was great. I guess I wonder, and I think we absolutely should do it. I guess I wonder if we should have some sort of open forums for people before we even start with that, just to have a Zoom meeting, get it advertised in the source to say, come understand what affordable housing is, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess one of the things I've wondered about is whether we could ever co-opt David Fink into coming to speak and doing a question and answer session that's for the benefit of the town as a kickoff, sort of. Get him there and get us all there, and we can have a debate or a panel or whatever, or even have David sort of give his overview like he did for us, which I thought was really, really informative, and kind of I think it starts to break down some of those barriers, because some of the things that he brought up were just very good points. And some of the issues that people have with affordable housing, just the facts don't bear out the issues, crime and overcrowding of schools and, all of those things. I'm taking that on face, but I believe it's to be true. Plus the desegregate CT also says that as well. So, I just think that would be an interesting way to start it off, perhaps. I don't know, Dave, we've done other committees that way. This is more than anything else, this is probably more of an educational process than many things that we've tried, I suspect.
Or do we get our message out, or do we get our message out first by way of video, something positive that can define the issue, rather than have, an initial meeting where some people may just be negative from the get-go and they begin to define it. So have people react to something that's positive. I'm not saying that's the right way, but I think it always pays to help to define your message first.
I would say, like, just on top of that, I did a project for Shell in the Netherlands, and the first thing they did internally was to kind of create a series of what they called value drivers, to help put together a mission statement, which could be X amount of pages long. But the value drivers were literally 6 bulleted sentences that were just super digestible for the neighborhood. And it just really helped to kind of spearhead that effort and simplify everything internally for Shell and us as the architects or designers or planners, to say, these are the goals, this is what we're doing. And then throughout the design process, always kind of going back to those value drivers or that mission statement as a sort of checklist, and making sure that every single decision we did along the way is kind of coming back and hitting all of those points. But to start the conversation, something that simple, just that bulleted points, maybe that's what's presented in the video, was really helpful for us.
And I guess for me, so I like that idea a lot. And I do like the idea of having people, a forum, and, but I want to make sure we know what we're talking about when we invite people to the table. And so far, I feel like we come from different backgrounds, but we understand that Madison needs affordable housing. And I think getting some facts, that's going to help us when we have these meetings. Just like I like when you're doing policy, instead of just saying, well, this is what we need, say, this is Mrs. A, and this is what her story is. And if we all have some of that already, like right now, we have people from Guilford telling us what they learned. We have people like, David Fink telling us what he's learned. I think separating the myth from the facts, Peter, that's really important. What's going to happen in your schools, what's going to happen in, that is really important. But I feel like talking to some of the stakeholders, even if it means, we're individually going out and we're asking something like 10 questions that we all agree on, it gives us information in our own town that we can turn to specifically. Because right now we just know it to be true, but we have not researched it,
I think a survey of some sort, like some sort of public survey, would be really interesting as a sort of candid. You're literally catching it in the moment, right? Like, there's no way people can argue against it at that point when it is that kind of candid survey.
And would that be you're saying to the residents of Madison?
Right, like you propose, something at Stop and Shop, like here's a 10 question survey, check yes, check no to these like very simple questions or something like that. And then that's all recorded and presented to the community. And it's, then coming back and showing the community, like, this is what you have said. And so it's not necessarily us forcing it on them, but maybe them catching the fact that they recognize the problem themselves. So
I think one of the hardest things about a survey of a town for affordable housing is if you live in the town, you have managed to find yourself housing, right? So that's one of what affordable housing often is about who we're missing and why. And so while I agree, Chad, and I think it's important to have people from Madison speaking, it's a little bit, I'd like to include people who work in the town of Madison.
Right, absolutely.
And so I have to think about, how do we do that? Because obviously those are the people who we're missing. And so if you live in a home in Madison, you might say, no, we're fine.
Right.
So I don't know how that survey goes out. I don't have good.
I just want to bring up one thing. So we do have the Council of Governments going through an RFP to hire a consultant to assist us with this whole process. And the responses were actually due this past Wednesday. I haven't seen anything yet, but I did talk to the regional planner, and he agreed to allow me to participate in the selection process. So I'm going to kind of represent this group in the selection process for the consultant. So I think some of the things that we're talking about, such as some of the survey and some of the community outreach component, we may want to work with the consultant to ensure that, they agree that we're taking the right steps. So I think everything that people have brought up today are all very good ideas and, things that we'll incorporate. My only concern for today is, do we want to do some groundwork that really doesn't rely on consultant support? And then when the consultant's on is when we kind of really hit the ground running with a survey and with some of these other mechanisms. So I think the consultant just puts a little bit of a wrinkle in, our timeline more than anything else.
Before the entire committee came together, we had compiled a list of people that we wanted to go out and just talk to in general, sort of get the groundswell opinion if we can get it. And maybe we do that still. Maybe we do our own reconnaissance at this point and, get a list of 10 questions, and we go back through the list and assign it out to the committee, and, we approach the town and various parties and just start to have that discussion, which I think could be separate and distinct from what the consultant might do. Just do a little bit of our own groundwork.
Yeah, I like the idea. The other thing I thought about, Peter, was, trying to identify those people that will be able to tell positive personal stories. Because certainly the consultant's not going to know locally who to find, but if we could try to find out who those people are. And regarding the video, I think a video would be helpful, and we could almost utilize a Zoom format if we can figure out how to thread everything together, where someone gives a 2 to 3 minute talk, and we can kind of post them to our website and figure out how to stitch it all together into a video. But it might be easier to do a video with a Zoom format than it was in the past.
Yeah, I mean, it could be as easy as we go out and we have these 10 questions and we each have our list of people. And I mean, honestly, we can take out our iPhones for now and have a 1 minute. And if it's good, when we have our first meeting, if it's a Zoom meeting, it's as simple as just sharing some little snippets here and there. Right. Like technology has changed so much that some of the things they spent money on, my 15-year-old could string together very nicely, and, we wouldn't have to. But I guess I feel like the next step is to talk to people in our community, as many people as we can, with the right questions. I really do.
Are you talking about, so is the first step establishing the need, and to kind of get to Chad's point of a set of principles and value drivers, is the first step asking community members, in their opinion, if there is a need, identifying need? Is that what you're thinking, or everybody thinking?
That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking identifying the need. And I feel like we understand from doing some of this work already, or from our own backgrounds, what the need is. But that's not the same as talking to somebody who's going to articulate the need. That's what that video was, right? And that could be a lot of different people. But yes, it's a lot more powerful to hear the need from the person's perspective, rather than this is just kind of what we think. Yes.
So identification of need is the first, because without need, you're solving a problem that doesn't exist, right? So, which
I think when there's knee-jerk reactions, that's going to be one of the things people say.
Yeah.
I think also identifying the need and showing who those people are who have the need. I've always found the hardest thing about affordable housing is people live in communities because they want to be in that community and they want to keep it the same way, right? So I don't know how to say it more than that, but I thought what Guilford did a good job of showing, here is someone who was born and raised in Guilford who can no longer live in Guilford. And here is what this could look like. Yeah.
Are you looking for a testimonial from actual current Madison residents? I didn't see the video yet. Because we're discussing, as long as I've worked here, it's been the number one biggest hurdle as the social services agent that we've met with almost every single client. And that is the story we hear over and over again here in Madison, is that I grew up here, or I moved here 15 years ago and I can no longer afford to live here. I'm about to get evicted, or I have to move in with somebody else in order to stay in town for my kids to stay in the school. Or we have a lot of people who are taking jobs in Madison, who are looking for places to live in Madison and are unable to find them. Yesterday alone, I took 3 separate phone calls from 3 separate individuals asking about some sort of affordable housing in Madison. So I'm just curious if you're looking for those types of stories specifically.
Yes, and yes, all of those. Every story. Yes. And so that's right. So it will be going to, teachers and going to people who are at Stop and Shop, and, it'll be, do you have a few minutes to talk? And we'll each have, but yes, that's what we're looking for. Exactly. And so I don't think it has to be a Madison resident, but it's somebody who, would live in Madison if there were affordable housing.
Yeah, I get those calls all the time. A lot of people from out of town calling us as social services people saying, how do I get in town? Where can I live that's affordable for our family? So yeah, just let me know how we would go about that, because I agree. I think it has to be the same set of questions for everybody. But you're definitely going to get a different response from people who have an urgency versus people who live here, are established and in, a good standing position.
I think it does make sense to talk to folks, let our town residents also, seniors who are looking to downsize, that type of situation. Because I think that that'll help folks in the community maybe identify with them. So that would be worthwhile too.
And I think David Fink also identified a sort of metric that was housing burden, people who are spending, more than a certain amount of their income. I think that, that story is also an interesting one to tell as well.
That's so, okay. So I'm just trying to put them into categories of what I'm hearing. So there are people who work in our town who can't live here. So that's, could be teachers and people working at Stop and Shop, and, there are people living in our town, but they're spending more than their income, that more than the guidelines are, which is somewhere between 25 to 30% of their income on housing. There are people who live in our town, seniors and others who might downsize, but there's nowhere to downsize. I think there are people who live right now in the limited affordable housing in Madison that would be worth talking to. And maybe that's what Dave was getting at, is that there are families and in certain places who might be willing to talk to us, as well as Concord Meadows residents, things like that, people who would be willing to talk to us and say what their story is. And, and then there's the wait lists of things like wait lists of those places. So maybe the next step is to pull back that list that we had, but also to think of and I just said 10 questions, but I think Dave Letterman shaped that whole thing for all of us. It doesn't have to be 10, but what are the questions really that we want to ask people? And then I think we want to be comfortable doing these tiny interviews where we say what we're doing and why we're looking to get this information, because some of the questions, like a senior who might want to downsize, they might be willing to talk to us, but Chad, the people you identified who are spending more than they should on housing, that's a more sensitive conversation, So I guess I would think the next step is formulating the questions and the list of people to ask, and starting at least to gather that information before we have the consultant who might help us focus on what we should be doing. But I think this will help us. I mean, there's I don't know how many of us are on the committee, 8, 7. So, and I don't know, Crystal and Heather, if you're willing to do some of this as well. But I mean, if we all reach out to something like 5 people, we're already getting some answers from different people in the community.
Yeah, I'm happy to. The need from last year to this year, and I wish I was exaggerating when I tell you my caseload has increased by almost 80%. So I've gone from somewhere in 60 to 70 families, upwards of 170 families that are currently at some sort of risk or families in crisis in Madison. So I have a large pool of people that I could pull from, who I'm sure would be willing to discuss, what that affordable housing would mean for them. I just wanted to also mention to you that not more than once in recent months, like I would say within the last 2 months when this all started, I've started receiving calls from people asking me if they can be put on the affordable housing wait list, which I'm assuming is just some sort of fantasy thing that is going around. However, it shows that even just the whisper of this in the community has already made an impact on what people are hoping to see for the future. So I have people who are like, put me on a list to be called to be put on a list already. So those are people I think also we need to talk to and make sure we're getting their opinion on. So I'm happy to talk to anyone who will talk, who will be willing to answer will be the question. And obviously we can't share any of their personal details unless they agree to it. But I do think that that's a huge population that we need to make sure that we cover very well.
It's interesting. Maybe if we have these conversations with people, what we might be able to do is, as we end the conversation with everybody, just say, would you be willing to have to participate in a video if we wanted to create one for the town? I wonder if we could just, that's the final question we could ask people, because then we could go back. They've already said yes, and we could, I mean, I'm not very technologically savvy, but it'd be pretty easy to, you know, have somebody come back with their iPhone or whatever and record it. But then we've gotten their complete, you know, concurrence to do it. And, you know, those might be the best people for, those are the people that should be in the video, probably. I mean, obviously we want prominent citizens and somebody from the Board of Selectmen on both sides of the political parties or political persuasion, but that would be helpful, I think. I like the idea of going back with the questions and starting to just, you know, dig around.
Yeah, and
think
I
the
like what you just
questions
said.
will- oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Heather.
I just was going to say, I think the questions will also help you develop a list of myths that we have to possibly debunk in the future too. So, you know, maybe leave one open-ended question about what are your thoughts, you know, what's your first thought when you think of affordable housing, something related to that.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, there's sort of, from what Peter was saying, you know, there's also interviewing stakeholders or people around town who once we have some of this information, providing it sort of one-on-one to some of those people, and to see if they're willing to also, you know, even though they're not the people who need affordable housing, but they're the people who understand why this could help the community. I guess I'm thinking, Dave, you have that list, right, of people, but I think when you talked about it, it was slightly different. It wasn't necessary. I mean, there's identifying the need, there's getting the word out, there's different things. Was this, that list identifying the need, or just, do you remember what it was exactly?
It was initially a list of, we were going to do outreach to find additional committee members, and then it kind of morphed into a list of people that we just want to interface with as part of this process. That was really kind of how it evolved.
Because I feel like that list is still very important, but I sort of feel like talking to the people Crystal has identified and that we've identified, you know, spending a month doing that and just sort of putting those answers together might help us when we go speak to stakeholders around Madison before we even have the first educational forum.
I agree with that recommendation. I think, you know, I think we need to build the team, you know, and the team is the people that are going to advocate for these changes. And so I think that outreach effort will help us build a team before we start going out and trying to have to debunk the myths and because those personal stories, I think, are going to be the most influential on people's minds.
And talking to the folks who have the need, as Crystal identified, it's going to make us better advocates too. It's going to, you know,
Right.
No question.
So it's hard to, I feel like it's hard to do process on Zoom, but it seems to me that we need our list of who are the people we're talking to, and then, you know, who's going and talking to which people when, and what are the questions we're asking. So sort of, you know, I feel like yeah.
No, sorry, maybe I'm jumping. Do you want to just, you know, throw up a Google Doc and we all, you know, contribute questions and then winnow it down to X?
I think that's a great idea. Does everyone work with Google Docs? Because I find that if you're a Google Doc person or you're a Dropbox, I've just done this before where people will say, where did that Google Doc go? But everyone feels good about that. I think that's a great idea. So that not one person's writing it, and I'd be happy to just start that. Or though, Dave, No.
Heather started one, right, Heather? You did one already. So maybe what I could do is I could drop the initial kind of contact list into that, and then we'll share the link with everybody, and then we can start,
I
modifying
think
it.
the document was the list of folks in the community that we were looking to connect with, but I could make another one for the questions if you want me to.
So I would think 3, if it's possible. One is the questions we would be asking. One, for lack of a better word, would be stakeholders. That's probably the list you started, although it was combined with then the third one, which is, people who could articulate the need. Because I think the people who can articulate the need versus the ones who live in the community who would accept the need and who are people who could push this forward, they're different. And I think we are talking to the need first before we go to the others. Is that clear to everyone? Does everyone feel like that's right?
Yeah, I think so, for sure.
Yep.
And, we meet again in 2 weeks. So maybe we say this week, we really try to put down our thoughts so that we can edit it. And maybe in 2 weeks' time, we would be ready to finalize the list of questions and start our initial interviews and how we're going to do that. And maybe interview is too strong a word and makes you feel like you have to be too prepared. But in my mind, these are discussions that, as long as we've sort of gotten an idea of what we want, we'll all be fine having these discussions. Do you all feel comfortable doing that? It sounds like Crystal has a lot of people who we could reach out to. It also makes me wonder if we draft a very quick release, which would be easy enough, and only give it to someone who seems like they might be interested in sharing their story. Not everyone would need this release, but it's always worth asking someone at the end, can I share your story? In my opinion, I'm always surprised at who is willing to share their story once you talk to them.
So I couldn't obviously provide a list of people for other people to call.
Oh, right.
I mean, Heather be in the same position. So we would have to do the initial calling, and then maybe there could be more follow-up about stories, can depend on the answers and who signs the release.
And I would see it like this, Crystal. I mean, the way I do it when a reporter says, I'd like to hear about people who are losing their housing. And then I call up like 10 people and say, there's this reporter who's interested. Are you interested in talking to them? Can I give them your name? I don't know that you need a formal legal release. If they say, yes, you can give, and if they say no, obviously we won't know about them. And then I think there's people that we don't have a name for, meaning they have a job somewhere in the community and we're going to try to talk to them, but it's not like a specific teacher. It's like teachers or something like, you know what I mean?
So do we envision the surveying strictly to be face-to-face conversations with people, or are we looking to do sort of a Survey Monkey, post a link out in the community and let people come to it online? Because I think that if you do it both ways, I think if you put it out as a link that people can go to, you can also identify folks to talk to down the road that would be willing to be on video too.
I guess I'm envisioning us getting some information, and by getting information, we're going to people and talking to them. But the survey, I think, is something that is important and down the line, and the consultant probably will help us formulate those ideas. This is just over the next month or two before we reach out to the community. What is the need? And I think from doing some of this, we'll at least be able to talk about the need that we've found. Do other people, I just feel like I'm not ready to put together a survey, and surveys are, the people who do them know what makes a person answer one way and what, and so I don't want to be in the business of writing that survey if we have somebody who does that for a living, but that's just my feeling.
And it may be that the consultant that gets hired from SCROG will be doing that as well, I would guess.
That's what I would hope.
Yeah, I would hope they would do that.
Yeah, for this, I feel like the people who've spoken to us so far, they've talked to a lot of different people about the need, and we just haven't yet in our community had these conversations that'll help us be, be able to share the need and not just this is what we think because we heard it from other towns.
I totally agree.
Yeah, okay. All right, so I think,
Sarah, can you review what those 3 different Google documents will be on?
sure. So so one would be the 10 questions, the questions, don't say 10, the questions we're going to ask people. The second would be stakeholders throughout the community. And the third would be people we've identified who may have a need. Either they currently live in our community or they would live in our community. So I would say live in our community, work in our community, or trying to get into our community.
Thank you.
All right, Dave, I think you already sort of gave us the update, right? Which is you got
so-
yourself on this election,
Yes,
so that's
yep.
great.
Yeah, and I'll keep you updated. I just, like I said, I looked at the RFP. It said responses were due this past Wednesday, the 21st. I haven't heard anything yet. So if I don't hear by mid next week, I'll follow up.
Meaning you don't even know if there were responses or?
Well, I'm sure there were responses. I just haven't gotten any communication yet. So once I get that communication, then I'll let everybody know.
Okay. I think we have our next steps for now.
That's progress.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Anyone have any other thoughts or things that we didn't bring up or things that you wanted to discuss that you heard from the speakers that we have not talked about?
I keep thinking about what David Fink said. You'll never look at housing the same way again in your town, or buildings that are vacant or whatever. I find myself driving by certain things like, oh yeah, right. And I think of what David was talking about. He was absolutely right. I enjoyed it. I thought that was really valuable. I thought he was very, very helpful.
I have a friend who's a practicing architect in Charleston who's kind of, really given his entire practice to affordable housing. And I was actually just visiting with him last week. And he has a proposal that I think is pretty interesting. He said, I know it's Charleston, but I think there's also kind of a lot of similarities in a very kind of protected shoreline town. And he came up with a proposal that's obviously addressing Charleston's needs, but I think it's a really flexible solution that I think might be interesting for us to look at. And he has offered to just give, a 10 or 15 minute just to say, hey, this is what I did. This is a solution for what Charleston is looking at. But price points and the way Madison and Charleston, it's affordable housing is really similar in terms of dollar, but it's looking at how a single family house could be broken down into multiple units without any walls. And it's just different types of living that maybe younger people may be more open to, if that is who we find is the need. But I don't know. I thought it might be interesting for the group to take, 10 or 15 minutes and have him, give a short little presentation if you guys are open to it.
Sounds very cool. Love to hear that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Also, if he has something that he'd be willing to share in writing.
Yeah, so he's been working with a developer. He's given a couple of TED Talks too on affordable housing. So I can see what he has in terms of metrics, but I think he's a super interesting person to talk to about it.
That sounds good to me. And Peter, I know you mentioned the myths. I did not yet see that, but do you think that's worth it for us all to try to see?
Yeah, I do. I just found that the Desegregate CT website in general is just pretty informative. You don't have to agree with everything, but they bring a lot of facts forward.
Yeah.
And we need that kind of education. And I thought the myths thing was, I keep calling it a thing. There is a name for it, but the myths was in it, was just very helpful. And it did focus a bit on Senate Bill 1024, but they had a person on the thing from, she was the former first selectman of Greenwich. Greenwich is obviously, as affluent as Madison might be, Greenwich is obviously higher up than we are, I suspect. And just how they've had success doing it. And it just kind of tells me it can be done. And then we can make this work. So I don't know, I thought it was very valuable. And there's other webinars on there as well that are just informative. They just kind of fill the knowledge gaps.
So I agree. And, I've seen her speak, and I feel like there's a lot of information there that was really, really helpful. I know that people are concerned about being attached to a message, but I feel like that might be a speaker we want to have. But for now, I think that's helpful to know that we should, maybe we could do our homework. And Chad, I think your friend sounds like a good resource, but also if there's a TED Talk or something that we can watch on our own, because we won't get to him in the next 2 weeks or so, that might be good. I know that David Fink also provided a lot of resources when he wrote that email back to us. And so it's worth going back to that and saying, what do we need to know? Because I think one of the most important things is that we educate ourselves, so that when, questions come up, we're able to pull out the statistics that we know or the things that we've learned. All right. I think, Peter, did you?
I was just going to add one comment to that. The idea of statistics. I had to make a presentation just where we are in our committee to planning and zoning. And one of the most overwhelming statistics that I've heard so far is just how housing burdened even the people in Madison are. It's mind-numbing to think that, you drive anywhere in this town, you think that does not exist, and it absolutely exists. And the number is what, 25 to 30%, depending on whether it's mortgage or rent. That's stunning.
Peter, the only thing I meant to talk about with you about that is I've questioned that statistic before, only because I think there is obviously a portion of the population that fits that.
Right.
But if you are a high income earner and you choose to spend 30% of your high income on your housing costs, and you still have a whole lot of money in that remaining 70%, are you really burdened? And so I would love to see a statistic that was based on income level, because I do think it makes a difference. Guy making $2 million, he chooses to spend, a quarter of it on housing, he's got a lot of money still.
But isn't it defined as 30% of the average median salary?
It is. It usually is by HUD, right? That is, at least when you're looking at what somebody should spend on their housing.
Right.
But I think what Dave's saying is,
I get what he's saying, but I mean, I think David Fink's data is what, if you go to the housing partnership, whatever that is, his data talks about that in there. And I'm guessing he was only using that which was eligible on the, on the average median income. I could be wrong.
But no, some of the Alice figures, though, are not specific to that average median income. They're just specific to household income. And so
maybe that's the difference.
I think we should try to understand that, because I expect at some point someone will challenge us on that, and we should try to understand it a little bit better. I think it is a good talking point, and it's true in a lot of sense. But maybe I'll take that as a task on my own, because I've talked about it a little bit with David in the past, but maybe I can try to dig into that a little bit more.
And if you dig into it, I don't know how you do this, but it's also how people report their income. So, this town has a lot of salespeople and commissioned, so their annual income may, it depends how they're reporting their annual income,
Right.
I don't know if that's clear, but yeah.
Right. And that's why to me, this just means those personal stories are even that much more important, because people can poke holes in statistics all the time. But if your neighbor is having an issue because they were divorced or what have you, that resonates a lot more with people. So I love the idea of talking to people for their stories.
Yeah, and that's where I think Crystal and Heather, you're very helpful with the people that that's whether people want to give their names or not, those stories are going to be really helpful.
Can I
All
bring
right.
up one other thing before we close, Sarah?
Sure.
Because you alluded to it a little bit earlier. You know, there is a controversy around a proposed cluster housing project in town, which is, you know, not affordable. And then there's some controversy surrounding some other things about, you know, floodplain ordinance changes. So in my mind, when we're talking about this effort, you know, we need to be very focused on, you know, affordable housing and talking about affordable housing, but it also is, we need to figure out a way to communicate need for change just in general, and how we get people to accept, you know, change, and how change is going to be, you know, necessary for Madison. And so I want to, you know, as we talk about this, think through, you know, how we communicate that, because, you know, what you said, Sarah, earlier is exactly right. People have moved here because they like it how it is. And so they don't want it to change. They want it just the way it is. But, you know, that's not a possibility. You know, everywhere changes. If you've lived anywhere else and you go back, you see change. And so our community is going to have to be the same way. So I'm struggling with that on a lot of other fronts right now. So it's just, I want to bring that struggle to this group as well, because I don't want to lose sight of, if we can fully explain the affordable housing question to people, there's still going to be that resistance to change that we need to work through. So.
And that's where I think our networks are so important. That's why I feel like this group educating, it's everyone educating themselves and going out into the community. I'm going to go back to the school board for 1 second. And, you know, the committee that successfully defeated the referendum, and whatever you think about it, one of their messages was, not bricks and mortar, textbooks. That's what we should be spending our money on. We don't have textbooks in our school, okay? We haven't spent money on textbooks in God knows how long. So that was like a quaint idea of how schools work that was totally not right. So whatever you think or don't think, they got a message out there that so resonated with people that people couldn't hear anything else. And so I do think people attach to images and things that they think and know. And I think our job is to get as educated as we can, so we can say, actually, we don't spend money on textbooks, something that simple, so that we can, you know, all be on the same page. And there are some things that are just factually incorrect, that we need to just, that talking to our neighbors, talking to our networks, talking to the people we work with, that's going to make the most difference. That's my humble opinion. All right, well, with that, I'll get off the soapbox and I'll say thank you. And it sounds like we have some work to do. Thanks for everyone for offering some people that we should read and look at, and we'll work on these documents for the next 2 weeks. And thank you, Andrea, for taking minutes. I don't think you need to circulate them to just David and to me. You can circulate them to the group, or you can give them to us to circulate as you wish, but you can also feel free to.
I probably feel more comfortable giving them to you first.
Okay, no worries, fine. Okay, then I'll circulate them to the group, no problem. Okay, everyone. Also, each time you are invited to give agenda items, so you don't have to wait for me to invite you. You know, I think we have what we're doing next time, but if you have ideas, please feel free just to reach out. Okay.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Yeah. Do I have to make a motion to adjourn? I move to adjourn. Bye all. Hope to see you
Bye.
one day in person.
Yeah, no kidding.
That'll happen.